Amanda, you 9 a.m. You are live.
Power is there.
Well, happy April morning to everyone. This day, Bannock County Commissioners are in sessions, Thursday, April 17th. And with us this morning, we have Southeast Idaho Public Health with their budget proposal. So Maggie?
Mr. Chair,
Oh, yeah, that's right.
we have an amendment to our
Right.
agenda, and I'd make a motion that we accept the amended agenda.
We have a motion discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. It's even highlighted on the top of my list. I was just so excited to hear from Maggie that I couldn't wait.
Yeah, I'll bet. Thank you so much for your time this morning. With me, I have Matt Merrill, who is our IT Systems Director, and Josh Leach, who is our HIPAA and GIS expert and program specialist. So they just are interested in learning more about the budgeting process. So I suggested that they tag along. So,
I thought they just missed seeing me.
well, that's part of it too, Ernie. Yes, absolutely. So what we're presenting to you this morning is what our Board of Health recommended as a proposal for our fiscal year 2026, which will begin on July 1st, at their meeting on April 10th. So we're just going around meeting with all the counties to share this recommendation. And then our budget hearing will be held on Thursday, May 22nd at 9:30 in the morning. As you may recall, the host of the budget hearing rotates by county alphabetically, and it is Bannock County's turn to host. My understanding is you're all going to be gone that day, but we do have a virtual option. So I'll make sure to get the materials that you need.
I'll be in town.
Okay.
Okay, so you could designate a proxy.
I got a boy graduating from high school in Utah, so I'll have to.
So he may or may not.
I may or may not.
We'll work it out.
Okay,
Go through there.
great. So that, that link to the meeting is on your packet. So, we'll just be in touch and make sure you have the materials you need to lead the meeting prior to that. Okay, so I will walk through this page by page. We're going to start with an overall picture and then dive into some of the detail about how we got the numbers that we got. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask me. I'm happy to try and answer them, and we'll just get started. So on page 1 is our budget request for fiscal year 2026. I'll explain the columns and then we'll start at the top of the page and work our way down. Column 1 is our current year adjusted budget that we're operating under right now. Column 2 is our original budget that was passed at the budget hearing last May. So every once in a while, we will have changes in our revenue. We'll maybe get a new sub-grant, or maybe one will go away, and it will have a significant impact on our revenue. So we will go to our Board of Health and explain that situation, and they will choose to make a budget adjustment or not. We try to do that very rarely, only if it's really going to have a significant impact. So we have done that in this fiscal year, and that's why we have that adjusted budget column. Column 3 in the yellow is what we're proposing to begin on July 1st of this year. Column 4 is the number difference between our current adjusted budget and what we're proposing for 2026. And then column 5 is the percentage change. So starting at the top, our FTE or full-time equivalent employees, we're projecting to go down 5.52 FTEs or 6.5%. That is largely due to the final closeout of some COVID grant funding. And so as that funding goes away, those positions also go away. We also are pretty rigorous about if we have a position come open, really taking a look at that and seeing, is this something that we need to fill, or good morning, is it something that other people can reasonably take on those responsibilities and us not fill that position? So sometimes we're able to do that, sometimes not. So when we look at expenditures, we are projecting an overall decrease of 5.1%, just under $500,000. Our largest expense category is personnel, and we are projecting a decrease of 2.6% or 185,771. That number does include change in employee compensation that was approved by our board also at their April 10th meeting. That personnel cost also includes an insurance increase per person for the agency's share of our employees' health insurance. It's going up $1,430 a person this next year. So that was a pretty sizable bump. Operating costs we're projecting to go down 10.2% or $257,157. And we currently have no capital outlay projects planned for this fiscal year. So any questions on expenditures?
No.
Okay. So for revenue, we are projecting a 4.4% decrease of $413,836. So we'll look at each of those revenue streams and we'll dive more deeply into the county detail on subsequent pages. So what we requested from the counties and recommended to our board was a 3% increase for the counties this year. They agreed with that and then made a motion to have 50% of that 3% increase funded by the counties and 50% funded by a restricted fund that we hold, which is called our county drawdown fund that we created. Commissioner Moser, you may remember with the implementation of House Bill 316. So that motion passed, and so even though we're asking for 3%, 50% of that is being funded by our reserve funds. So the total increase to the counties this fiscal year being proposed is $17,775, and again, we'll get into that on subsequent pages. That 3% increase in total is $71,103. We do have the timing difference between the state and public health district fiscal year and the county fiscal year, so that's a reduction based on that timing difference of $17,776. When we then take off 50%, that's $35,552. Again, that piece is being funded by our district reserves. What we have left is a balance to be funded by the counties of that same amount, $35,552. So for Bannock County, what that means is actually a decrease of 0.1% or $1,004. Our subgrants we're projecting to go down 10.9%, just over $500,000, and we're projecting an increase in fees of 3% or $71,835. We are projecting a decrease in the dollar amounts that we are needing to fund the opioid work that we're doing, and those are funds that we receive from the opioid settlement with the states. We did have a pretty sizable chunk of those funds kind of front-loaded to us. We got about 4 years worth of funding, so that's placed in a restricted fund also, and we draw down on that as needed to fund programming. So then our district funds, we are projecting, again, because we're covering that 50% of the 3% increase, we're projecting to use $35,552. So any questions on the overall summary? Commissioner Bullock?
Question. I understand what you're doing, but I guess I'm always a little bit nervous about drawing down a fund that's set up for, future contingencies you're not aware of. Is that the best use of that, draw that down versus keep hedging that against the future? Just asking that question, because sometimes when you get too quick to jump into reserve funds, you rue the day that you do that sometimes in a day or two. Just explain your logic or reasoning on that.
I think that's a very good question. So our board's philosophy has always been to maintain an unobligated reserve of at least 3 to 4 months of operating expenses that is unobligated. Right now, we're at about 4.4 months, so that's a little bit higher than what we would hope to have. We do, in addition to those unobligated funds, have designated funds, and that's where we're drawing from for this particular, covering 50% of that 3% increase. We've had that in place for about 3 years now, and this is the first year that the board has made a recommendation to utilize some of those funds. So in that fund right now, I think we have about $260,000. So we're using 35.5 this year. We try to take a really conservative approach about when we ask the board to use those funds or not. And again, this was something that they recommended. We didn't come to them. And I think it may have been partially because some of our smaller counties were seeing pretty sizable swings, even though we were only asking for 3%, because of changes in market valuation, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But our restricted funds include things like a building fund, because if we, need to make changes to our building, sometimes those things are pretty costly. In the last year in our Bannock County, or not in the last year, but the last couple of years, our Bannock County building, we've replaced the roof, which it had been the original roof, and we moved into that building in July of 1998. We've replaced the HVAC system. We've redone the parking lot. So we've had some pretty sizable things that we've taken out of that building fund. We also have a legal fund because we don't have access to any type of public attorney. We have a public health emergency fund if we were to have something like a measles outbreak come to our 8-county region that we could use if we needed to. So again, we have to have the board's permission to access those funds, and we take a very conservative approach. We really work hard to balance the budget without those, but because the board made the recommendation to cover half of that 3% with these funds, they felt like it would just be beneficial to the counties overall. They have the option of fully funding the 3% increase, or even more out of that fund, but they've chosen not to do that. So does that help?
It's a healthy discussion every time that we talk about it in board meetings.
Yeah,
reviewed it.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that, but boy, I always hate mortgage in the future. To satisfy the easy task today.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So I'm just asking that
Then the other
question.
part on that is, this is the first time in 2 or 3 years that we've increased the 3%.
Yes, yeah,
We've stayed flat for quite a few years, and like I say, then you get a few of these smaller counties that had a 6% increase
yeah.
along with the 3% or whatever. I mean,
Yeah, and I do think that's why the recommendation was to only fund 50% of it. I think that the board member who made that recommendation felt like $35,000 was a reasonable amount to pull out of that restricted fund. But again, we try to be pretty conservative with how we approach using those, and we've done some things over the last number of years to infuse some money into those funds. You may remember in Bingham County a number of years ago, we had an office that was really too big for us. So we sold that building to Bingham Memorial Hospital. They sold us a smaller office, and so we were able to put about $1.2 million into that reserve because we recognized that we need to have some solid financial sustainability. So we're continuously trying to look at ways for how can we maintain a healthy but not unreasonable reserve. And then the board every year, usually in September or October, If we had any surplus at the end of a fiscal year, we'll designate where to put those surplus funds for future.
And we had some good interest income this year that was over anticipated. So again, that's another reason why we opted to go this route. We felt.
Yeah, our interest this last 12 months has been, I think, 4 times what we anticipated it would be. It's just been unprecedented. So, yeah.
Well, and thank you for that. I just know that the bulk of any reserve in here is going to be Bannock County as well, too, as the major contributor. So, but I understand that. I was just asking if all that dialogue had been discussed and why, which sounded like it was. So,
Yep.
Thank you.
As both of your fellow commissioners alluded to, it's usually a pretty robust conversation about how to handle that.
Thank you, Maggie.
You're welcome. Okay, on page 2, we'll dive into the county funding request. This funding formula is set in Idaho code. The code reference is at the top of the page. It's Title 39, Chapter 4. And so with that 3% increase, the proposed funding request in total from our counties is just over $2.4 million. So we'll start with the table on the top. That funding formula has 2 components. 70% of the contribution is based on population, and 30% is based on assessed market value. And so we look at Bannock County's population as a percentage of the whole, as well as the assessed market valuation. And so we'll start in the 3 columns on the left in the green. Those are the population numbers. We do get these numbers from the Census Bureau typically around the end of March. I think this year we got them like the 3rd week in March. So that shows Bannock County's population at just over 91,000, which is 48.5% of our total district population. Based on that component, the dollar amount requested from Bannock County for fiscal year 2026 based on population is $828,798. As we move into the purple, your assessed market valuation is a little bit less as a proportion of the total than your population number. It's at 41.5%. So the requested contribution based on market valuation is $303,969. When we remove the one-time county drawdown, that's $16,496 for a total county request of just over $1.1 million, which is 46.4% of our total request from our counties and a negative 2% increase. So we'll look at how we got to those numbers on the table below. So starting with the column on the left, in the white, Bannock County's current year contribution is $1,117,275. You actually have decreases based on changes in other counties for both the population and the market value components. It's a decrease of $654 based on population and just under $17,000 based on changes in market valuation. The 3% increase would be an increase of $32,992, but because we're funding half of that with district reserves, that's a reduction of $16,496. When we net the changes in columns 2, 3, 4, and 5, that's an overall reduction of just over $1,000, leaving the total requested dollar amount for fiscal year 26 at $1,116,271. So any changes on that or questions on that?
This is 2 years in a row, we've gone down about $1,000.
Okay, so on page 3, we'll look at the data that drive those changes. So starting in the table on the top of the page in the blue, our population numbers, Bannock County did grow 0.7% or 610 people. Power County actually had the biggest percentage increase in population at 1.6, and Butte County was our only county that saw a reduction in population of 23 individuals or 0.8%. Our overall population growth in the district was at 0.8%. When we look at the market valuation numbers in the green on the right hand of the table, overall, our district market valuation increased 6.4%. The county with the smallest growth was Bannock County, and I think that's probably just sort of a leveling off of a couple years of some pretty more significant increases. And then Bear Lake County had the biggest jump at 15.8%, with Caribou and Power County also experiencing double-digit percentage-wise growth. So the table on the bottom half of the page just represents the 7 public health districts in the state, and their kind of anchor community is there for your reference. District 2, based out of Lewiston and Moscow, had the smallest population growth at 0.6%, and the Caldwell area had the biggest percentage increase at 3.2%, just over 10,000 people. Overall, the state population grew at a rate of 1.9%. So when we look at market valuation, District 1, which is based out of Coeur d'Alene, had the smallest growth at 2.4%. And I think it was either last year or the year before, they had some wild growth in market valuation. They had a couple counties that were over 90%. So I think they probably just had not done it in a really long time and had a lot of ground to make up. But this year they're coming in with the smallest rate of growth. District 4, which is based out of Boise, had the largest growth just by a little bit at 7.8%. So any questions about that? Okay. Page 4 just shows you our funding streams. Our subgrants and contracts are our largest funding stream at 45.2%. Our fees for service are our second largest funding stream at 27.1%. Our county contributions are right behind that at 26.5%, and then about 1.1% of our overall budget is from the opioid drawdown funds. Page 5 shows the 10-year history of the county contributions to public health. So as you can, and this looks at original county aid that has been in place since the districts were created in 1970. And that's the blue bar. It looks at state aid, which we received a state general fund appropriation through fiscal year 2021, and then a partial appropriation in fiscal year 2022. That was when House Bill 316 kicked in, that eliminated county medical indigency funds and shifted that state general fund appropriation to the public health, or to the counties. So you can see the 10-year trend, it's stayed pretty level. And for the last 5 years, we have not requested an increase from the counties, with the caveat, of course, that your contribution did increase because of House Bill 316. So do you have any questions about that? Okay. Then the next page is just some of our major programs, which I think you guys are pretty familiar with. And then we do have a proxy form that if Commissioner Bullock was going to be in attendance for you, Chairman, we would need that completed in order for Bannock County to have a vote. And then the last couple pages are just language out of House Bill 316, including the language that now requires the chairman of the county commissioners or their proxy to be the voting voice at our budget hearing. So, questions?
Anything?
Been through it a few times.
Any future dilemmas with, some federal funds or anything else that are got you concerned?
Yes. So we've had 2 grants that we received stop work orders for. Thankfully, they were grants that we anticipated would be ending the end of June, so it wasn't a huge impact to us. We are concerned, Title 10, which is what funds a portion of our reproductive health services. The state of Idaho last year passed legislation that is in direct conflict with the federal guidance around that program. So the state was informed that we will no longer be receiving Title X funding. Thankfully, the Department of Health and Welfare is looking at some ways to sort of cover that cost for the time being, because there is some thought that there might be a shift in flexibility from the federal level, and that Idaho might once again be eligible for Title X funding maybe 4 to 6 months down the road. So we're taking a look at that. And then we're watching very closely, because it seems like every day programs that we thought were pretty stable and valued are being cut. So we're very conscious of that.
We all are.
Yeah, because it will have a direct impact on our communities if that continues. So we're hoping that it doesn't get worse.
Speaking of worse, what's your thoughts on the measles outbreak? Is that something you're watching here? What's our status locally?
That's a great question. So we are watching it very closely, have been for several months. So we've done a number of things. We've met as an entire team internally to walk through sort of a preparedness checklist to make sure that we have testing capability in place and public information messaging ready to go. In fact, we've been doing that already. We've pushed a lot of information out to all the child cares in the community that we work with. We have sent health alert messages to all the healthcare providers in our communities, talking about what to look for, what are the questions to ask, what are the tests to run if you have a suspect measles case. We have met with the Department of Health and Welfare and the other public health districts around the state to talk about statewide preparedness. We know that there have already been samples that have been sent to the state lab from other parts of the state. We have not had any recently. But just one of the really key pieces is providers knowing which test to run, because if they do the incorrect test, it really delays diagnosis, and then that kind of puts us behind the 8 ball as far as disease investigation. So I know that Matt and Josh and our preparedness team did a tabletop exercise recently to talk about, and I don't know if you guys want to talk about that at all, just looking at aspects of preparedness from like social media and being able to get information out to the community. So when we were on our call with the state, Dr. Christine Hahn, who is the state epidemiologist and medical director, who I have a ton of respect for, she really strongly believes it's not a matter of if, it's when. So that's concerning. We know that it is spread outside of that area. There are cases in Kansas and even up in Canada that we believe are connected to the Texas and New Mexico outbreak. And I've been on calls with the Lubbock Public Health District Director and other public health district directors nationwide. And her position is that they really probably have about 3 times more the number of cases than are being reported, because either they're relatively mild and people aren't going to the physician, or physicians aren't reporting them, or physicians aren't running the right tests. So it's highly possible that we will see cases here. Another thing that we're really watching is the tuberculosis outbreak in the state of Kansas. It's the largest TB outbreak in over 100 years in the States, and that's very concerning. I will share with you, we are evaluating a person right now at Portneuf that we believe probably has active TB, and that's gonna, anytime we have one of those, the response to that is pretty significant, because anybody that they've been in contact with we have to then evaluate with their consent, of course, for TB. So, and then if people do test positive for TB, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're an active case and can spread it to other people. They can be a latent case, but people with latent tuberculosis, it's very strongly recommended that they undergo treatment for that, which then it's a lot of medication for usually 4 to 6 months, but then they won't ever develop active TB if treatment is successful. So we're watching that. I will keep you posted. We should know today or tomorrow if in fact that person is active, but the signs are kind of pointing that way.
That they are active?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the press releases and that kind of stuff, your tabletop, has Wes been involved in any of that as our emergency manager or Emma?
This one was just internal, so our internal practices, but I know Paige is really good about working with our county emergency managers, and I believe that Emma's involved in the regional PIO group that Dana and Tracy participate in as well, so we'll definitely be getting information to them as well.
Okay.
On the measles thing, is there kind of an estimated potential timeline? Are we looking at like potentially within the next 6 months something happening, or 90 days?
So that's a great question. Based on some of the things I've heard about, like the population impacted primarily in the Texas outbreak, there is the potential that we could see cases really anytime.
Okay.
Just based on like travel patterns
Right.
and things like that. So, yeah, we are definitely on like heightened alert for that.
Okay.
Don't go to Texas.
Nope. Nope.
Not yet. Or eastern New Mexico either.
Right.
Mm,
Anything else for me?
No, thank you.
Okay, I just want to ask, do you feel like this is a budget request that Bannock County is able to support?
I think so.
You know how I feel all the time. And we've always paid our share.
Yes, and we appreciate that.
Ken?
You know, if nobody wants to spend money, but you guys do such a wonderful job for so many different people, and I don't know how we would reach those. That personnel, those fractions of the, sometimes I don't think you guys get enough credit for what you do out there quietly. People don't know, so thank you.
Thank you very much. I will pass that on to our team because I know they will really appreciate that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks
Appreciate
very
it.
much.
Thank you.
Hey, it's good seeing you all. A little different from the responsible chair before.
Yeah. All right,
morning.
Christy Davenport in lieu of Dan Kendall.
Dan never looked so good.
Thank you. Christy Davenport, Management Assistant for Dan Kendall. I have a list of items I can read to you. So the maintenance updates, summer preparations are underway. Haha. Sprinkler irrigation systems are up and running. Dan's crew is mowing the village and the juvenile probation. The contractor mows the courthouse and the landfill. A furnace and condenser were recently replaced at the village. The village paid the majority of the equipment. There is one more system. There were 3 HVAC units, so there's one more left, and it's 20 years old, so Dan would like to replace it in the next few years. They're down to a skeleton maintenance crew while they are finishing the exhibit building, or working on the exhibit building. They're relying heavily on our office and the marshal's office to help through the summer. Basically, we are just collecting items for the new chambers and stuff like that. So just helping as much as we can for Dan. And department heads can still contact him on his cell and get assistance as needed. With regards to the projects, the annex project will be completed in the next couple of weeks. They're waiting for the roofer to set up platforms for the 7 rooftop condensers. You will see a crane on site lifting the old units out next week. And there was a setback on Tuesday with a small gas leak. The marshals did a great job with emergency responders, and the situation was remedied in approximately 2 hours. The YDC project had their concrete floor poured this week. Framing will begin immediately, and walls will be standing soon. They're expecting 15 plus framers on site to speed the project up and make up for lost time with the dirt work. The exhibit building also had its floor poured this past week. Interior framing has begun. The fiber optic cable was installed to the building, and Rocky Mountain Power will be installing the new power pole this month as well. And he sends thanks to Kyle and his crew for bringing dirt from the YDC project to help restore the landscaping. The 6th Street project is wrapping up with paint and punch list items. A final inspection will be scheduled this week, and the metal detector is arriving on Monday. Sidewalks were replaced as needed from the frost issues. They look perfect, he says. The sod, trees, and sprinklers are complete. The annex parking lot lines will be restored as they used to be this coming Saturday. So that is Dan's report.
Okay.
So any more details about the gas leak? Was it something that some broke?
So
or
I asked
did-
Anita,
I
and
don't
I'm not
know.
sure
I
if
never
you
did
guys-
hear.
from what Anita understood, it had to do with removing, disconnecting from the old HVAC system and reconnecting with the new HVAC system.
The last
There
I
was-
talked to them, they thought a valve had opened up that had been disconnected. And so,
I mean, I'm glad there wasn't any, I mean, something could have got really bad there. If we had an explosion or something after all of that, but I'm just curious.
and then.
So do our contractors actually go back and even proof that when they make a change to gas? Do they go back and
That's a good
do a
question.
sniff test of some sort or find out?
It's a lighter test.
Yeah.
Yeah, a bit. You may got a bit, but, I mean, you would think when we go from an old to a new system that somebody would have a meter or something in there to check and make sure, whatever. When you go from old to new,
I can
that
ask.
should be almost part of the routine. I
Standard,
would
yeah.
think.
I can ask Dan.
I was just curious. I mean, Dan's doing a great job. I just, kind of, with all of that, boy, that could have been really bad.
I'm glad it got caught when it did.
And then Jason, I did talk to Julie. We will open up that street even if the metal detectors aren't here for early voting
Yeah.
and stuff, so that'll happen. My only other concern about what was talked about right here is they're gonna bring a crane in and be lifting stuff. I'm concerned about our employees underneath. If there was a mishap and something, there's gotta be some communication with Anita of when this is gonna happen and stuff. 'Cause if you have them HVAC systems up above lifting them, I'd be concerned.
Those, have you been up there and seen those old units that they're gonna take out? They're huge. So, yeah, it's
I'll talk to
a
Dan
good
about
point.
that.
So that, yeah, and I can talk to him, but I just,
He may have already,
that come to my mind as we brought that up.
he may have already communicated with Anita and just neglected to put on the list, so.
So,
Okay. All right, let's go to the signature request from Idaho Power for the YDC.
Right, so this is for a service request. So I'm just going to read a short summary from Mr. Gary Peck from Idaho Power. Essentially, the scope of the project changed with the proposed movement and placement of the new building to the south to avoid the underground to Verizon. But as the project commenced, it was determined that a very large cut in the job site was required for the parking lot. That cut compromised depth requirements for the underground line to Verizon. There was only about 1 foot of cover over the underground line. Depth criteria is 42 to 48 inches. It was determined that the cost of modifying that section of underground line would be more expensive than going back to the original designed version. So we have already paid $39,648. The new amount is $48,589, which leaves a difference to pay of $8,941. So there's quite a few. If you are going to approve this, there's quite a few spots for you to sign, and then there's an invoice right after that. It's not in the invoices packet, so.
Now for the question I asked the other day that was premature. Do you have any thoughts on where that additional funds could come
Just
from?
take that one out of the ARPA monies and absorb it through probably the contingency
Okay,
on that building. I'm gonna probably end up doing another ARPA update next week,
okay.
as I've got about $200,000 worth of
Stress.
unanticipated invoices this week.
Okay. Oh, good times.
Yeah.
Good times. Any discussion on this?
No.
It is what it is.
They have already started.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the signature and service request from Idaho Power.
We have a motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. They gotta pay for that new building they got, didn't they?
And with that, we are to the consent agenda. So we have some invoices, commissioners' reports, salary rate approval forms, payroll report, and a certificate of residency approval. Any comments or discussion on any of those items?
No.
I think I'm good with it. I'll make a motion, we approve the items on the consent agenda.
Okay, we have a motion. All in favor, say aye.
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 Do have two invoices, ARPA invoices, well, ARPA or PIL, that I wanted to get your approval before you sign off on them. I have the final invoice for Western States for the road bridge pickups, or trucks. Remember the one bed came in less than ideal?
Yeah.
Western States finished out the work on that. So this project is turning back just over $6,700. So, for once, I'm not the bad news bearer.
Hey.
And then I've got two other invoices. The cement polishing for the jail. That project, when it was initially set up, they didn't know what they were going to get into until they started the work. That project did come in $9,877 more than it was supposed to. The process that this followed was not ideal. They did not come to us before the work was complete to give us that heads up. So it's over budget. I talked to the sheriff's office. They're going to take that $9,877 out of the second phase of paving for the parking lot. So essentially, that one is going to just wash.
Is that the right place to take that? Out of the parking lot? If we're gonna have money out of like the generator, would that be a better spot to take that so we don't?
We're trying to wash ARPA to make
Okay.
that negative. So what we can do is on the paving project, depending on how much they're gonna need to finish out that project, we could go ahead and have them finish using the generator money if it comes down to that. But right now, the paving project is at a 6-week hold because they're working on the tactical building and they don't want all those trucks running
Right,
around that. So that can be reassessed as we go.
okay. I just didn't want to cut that paving project
Yeah.
short.
That may still cut that project, even with the money we allotted, I don't know that it would complete the whole project, but maybe what we can do is have a Superior come in and give us a quote to finish everything. And then see what we can come up with those funds.
Okay.
And then the last one I have is sign up. This is for all of the signage that was just recently put up for more than just 6th Street. This was not anticipated in any projected budgets or projects. I'm requesting that we pay that out of PIL, since it does cover more than just 6th Street and the east entrances. And then, as I just said, I'll come before the board probably next Tuesday and provide an ARPA update to include, at Commissioner Huff's suggestion, review PIL obligations and what we've had to pay out of PIL, so that we've got a big picture.
You want these invoices back to you, the ones that we just talked about?
No, Christie needs to scan them because she tracks all of them as well.
Okay. Any questions on anything? Ken, you got any questions?
Nope.
Jason, what about you?
Nope.
Been kind of quiet over there today.
Yeah, I've got a lot going on today with the Secretary of State's office, so
Okay.
keeping up with them.